your name, yeah?
Yep.
Welcome to Life Science Success Podcast. My name is Don. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a consultant in life sciences. I help companies manage complexity and increase performance. One of the things I just wanted to cover really quickly is that I've created an organizational maturity assessment that will help organizations really assess their readiness to scale. And so it looks at key factors like the way that you manage teams, the way that you manage leadership and things like that inside of your organization. And so it's just a fabulous way to gauge gaps that you currently have in your organization and opportunities there. Additionally, I mentioned on an earlier episode of the podcast, we're currently looking for 2 sponsors. I have 4 slots total, have filled 2 of those slots and currently are looking for the final 2 sponsors. If you're interested in being a podcast sponsor for me, please reach out. Lastly, with that, in this episode of the Life Science Success Podcast, my guest is Lisa Tamati. Lisa is a keynote speaker and MC facilitator, corporate wellness coach. She works with organizations to inspire and motivate their teams to take incredible challenges. She also helps build mental resilience and a mindset for growth and leadership. So with that, welcome, Lisa.
Fantastic to be here on your wonderful show. Thank you so much for the honor. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I just wanted to just quickly note for our listeners, I mean, oftentimes I'm interviewing CEOs and leaders inside of life sciences, right? And so this episode is going to be a little bit different, from some of our other episodes. Lisa's someone that I'd really like to encourage the audience to check out because she's an ultramarathon. And she's also going to talk to us today about managing stress and building resilience. Those things pertain, I think, to everybody in the audience. So for sure, those things will be keys as well. So Lisa, will you just start by telling the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, great. I'm from New Zealand, so that's why the funny accent. And I have, a history as being a professional ultra endurance athlete. So that means I did crazy long distances. So I spent 25 years sort of competing in the world's toughest endurance events, racing plus places like Sahara and Death Valley, actually in the USA, one of my favorite races, and pushing the limits of human endurance, if you like. The funny thing, though, is that I have absolutely no talent as a runner. So an asthmatic, I broke my back when I was 21.
Oh, my.
I wasn't meant to be doing this type of thing, and I did it anyway. So I'm very much a bit of a head through the wall person. Had lots of adventures doing those sort of ultra marathons and over 140 ultras. Everywhere from the Sahara to the Arabian Desert, Libyan, Niger, Jordan, Gobi Desert, China, Death Valley, obviously a couple of times, different parts of the outback of Australia, Nepalese and Indian Himalayas. And at one point I ran right through New Zealand, my country, for charity, doing what I did, 2,250 Ks. What's that in miles? I don't know, 1,900 miles or something. And that, in 42 days. So that nearly bloody killed me. But lots of adventures and lots of learnings along this process. And I've always been an entrepreneur, so for better or worse, I must say. I've been, what I like to say is I'm unemployable, so I had to employ myself, sort of thing. I've had lots of adventures and lots of different businesses and things along the way. And goodness knows I could have done with your consulting. Scaling businesses is bloody hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fight. It's a fight for entrepreneurs, right? I mean, it's not something we all set out to do, and then all of a sudden you go, well, look, I was successful, with it being just me or me plus, a handful of people, and it's a game changer whenever you want to go to 20 people or more. It's a tough thing to do.
Tough. Yeah, it's tough to be able to scale, and you sort of, you're wearing so many hats as an entrepreneur, especially at the start out, stages. and you're trying to build a team, and you're not born on this earth with all this knowledge that you know how to do all this stuff. You sort of learn along the way, make mistakes, and reinvent the world 1,000 times. I know I have. One of my biggest problems in business is focus, like staying the course for the one thing that I'm meant to be doing. And so I always have to surround myself with people that say, stop chasing shiny objects, because that's one of my problems.
That's funny. What's the longest distance that you ever ran?
So apart from the run through New Zealand, which was obviously over consecutive days, but so 333 at a time, kilometers, not miles, so a little bit shorter. A lot of the races are around the 200, 220, that sort of thing. And some of the races are on roads, and you have crews and you have people looking after your every need. And then other times you're running across a desert with a backpack and there's nobody and there's nothing, and you've got to get yourself alive to the other end, sort of thing, with a couple of checkpoints in between. So yeah, there's lots of different types of races and lots of different sort of challenges that you're faced with along the way.
Yeah. So why don't we start with, one of your, the number of marathons that you ran overall as well.
Yeah, so 140 ultras. I don't know how many marathons. I didn't add them up, but and typically in training you were doing marathons every week. So over 70,000 kilometers in that sort of time. But as an ultra marathon runner, it's just like a business. You're very you're slow and steady. Like you're not Usain Bolt doing 100-meter sprint. You're out there for the long haul. You have lots of obstacles that you have to overcome. You have to manage yourself. You have to have a lot of self-discipline, and you have to sort of understand the process and believe in the process. And these are sorts of things that I like to have discussions around, because you can learn a lot from extreme sport that is really applicable into business. So especially when it comes to the mindset, the mental toughness, the overcoming of obstacles, the preparation and planning, the teamwork that goes into it, the risk mitigation, all of those sort of aspects that can really help you when you're out, running across the Sahara, can also help you when you're trying to navigate the business world, if that makes sense. Because yeah, it's a different arena, but it's the same sorts of principles. And it's, how long can you hang in there without seeing progress? How long can you go? Like I do a lot of health optimization coaching as part of my business, and genetic testing and things. And one of the biggest challenges I have is not giving people the information and the results of their testing and what they should be doing. It's the behavioral change, and it's the getting them to continue long enough to see results.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a bit of a story, if you don't mind me sharing.
Sure.
So 8 years ago, my mum, who has always been my biggest supporter and, always in my corner, she had a massive aneurysm and was left with massive brain damage, and they didn't think she was going to survive. But the surgeons did a wonderful job and saved her life, and she was in and out of a coma for a number of weeks and lost more and more of her brain over that time. When she stabilized and came out of that, she was 74 years old and had massive, massive brain damage. So unable to sit, talk, didn't know who she was. She was basically like a baby in an adult's body. And at that point, the doctors sort of said to me after a couple of months in rehab, look, there's just nothing we can do. And the damage is so bad, put her in an institution and, get ready for the worst. She's not going to be with us much longer. And being an ultramarathoner, I'm very bloody stubborn. And so I've always been told, like, oh, what you do is impossible. You can't run across here. You can't do this. You're not good enough. Whatever the case may be. So I never listen to the people who tell me I can't do something. And I go and search for people who tell me, oh, yes, you can. And here's what you got to do next, you see. So I started, just like I do with ultras, the same sort of tenacity and approach and determination I brought to her rehabilitation. And I started diving into the science and diving into the literature and working out ways to help people with brain injuries, and studied everything from hyperbaric oxygen therapy through, which was massively powerful, by the way, for her, through to, things like the keto diet and functional genomics and functional neurology and, you name it, I studied it basically. And it took me 2.5 years to get her from being, like this baby, unable to do anything, to interact, to remember who we are, to having a full driver's license, going to the gym 5 days a week and sort of walking 3 or 4 kilometers a day.
Wow.
And having a full life back. And I've actually written a book about it. If anyone's keen, there's the book. And that's my beautiful mum on the cover there. Her name's Isabel. And it's a story about overcoming the odds. So it's called Relentless for a reason. One of the reasons for the success with that journey, which was really against all the medical prognosis, it was, you can't do that, was because we just kept grinding out the training every day, all the time, and looking for the next thing. When I would get here some progress, I'd be like, right, what's next? What else can I do? What new thing can I learn? And tenacious, with studying and it blew me to pieces. I'll be honest with you, like burnout was a big thing in the last, few years. But I got her back, and to me, that was everything. And unfortunately, that wasn't the end of the story. A year and a half ago, my mum ended up with a tumors in the brain from a CNS lymphoma, which I know that you've run for charity for lymphoma. So thank you very much for your service there, because it's very, very much needed. And we were given the prognosis that, she, in this case, was terminally ill. There was nothing they could do, absolutely nothing, at 81 years old, and that she only had weeks to live because it was a very aggressive, fast-growing cancer. That's, again, I went back to the science. I went back and started studying and researching and finding doctors. And one of the beautiful things is I have a podcast too, which you're going to come on. I go and get the greatest doctors and scientists in the world and share their information. And so in this case, I went and got a whole lot of researchers in cancer on my show, selfishly. And we did the metabolic approach to cancer, which was a combination of things like hyperbaric oxygen, intravenous vitamin C, natural health supplements, like she takes over 150 pills a day, peptides, you name it, I basically did it. Very strict keto diet. Took us 12 weeks to get rid of the tumors, and we're now a year and a half into that journey, and she's cancer-free. You never want to say that you've beaten cancer, because cancer can be a nasty thing that can change. It's like a shape-shifting thing that can come back to bite you in the butt. But we stay one step ahead of her. And I think the key, once again, for her coming, because at that time when she had the brain tumors and the brain surgery, I lost her again. Like the brain damage was again massive. Wow. And I brought her back again to normal. And she's actually sitting over in the lounge over there doing some artwork as we speak, waiting for me. And so she's healthy and independent again and happy again. And I think one of the keys to that story is also the fact that we just keep going, and we're a great team. I do all the research. I, run the ship. I'm the fun police when it comes to the diet and all that sort of jazz. And I'm an iron, like I have an iron discipline when it comes to her. But she's willing to do all of the things that I ask her to do. And I treat her like an Olympic athlete. We're training for our Olympics. And that's the way I treat, I work with a lot of people with cancer now, and a lot of people with strokes and head injuries and things like that, with some major things going on in their lives. And it's not only the protocols and the development and of that side of things, but also the mindset is absolutely crucial, that you just don't ever give up, that you keep fighting, that you keep believing that you can see yourself as this healthy person again. If you can't see yourself as that healthy person, you will never get there. You have to have that vision.
Yep.
And I think that was really, really key. And I try to apply that to my businesses as well, sometimes successfully, sometimes less. But yeah.
Yeah, whenever I
So,
used to work in the hospital, the one thing that, I mean, with end stage cancer patients, so oftentimes cancer patients go through multiple therapies and they wind up kind of, this is the end of the road, right? The medicines that are available just, have sort of run out. And so they get to that point, and the one thing that all the doctors would say is the most important thing to convey to this patient is hope. There
yeah,
is still hope. I mean, they could walk in the next time they come in for therapy, and we could see a drastic change in something that we hadn't seen before, and it could be either good or bad based on just their mental state. So yeah, I
absolutely.
completely
Yeah.
critical as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's a book actually called oh gosh, what is it? Kelly Turner, Radical Remission, and it studies 1,000 people who've gone through cancer journeys, and they were all terminally ill, and why they didn't die, and the commonality, 7 out of the 10 were mindset
Mm.
related and spiritual related, and stress reduction, and all of those sorts of aspects, if you like. There was only 3 that were diet, lifestyle, exercise, all of that sort of stuff, and health supplements, and various therapies. But a big key piece of the puzzle is what mindset you come in with. And so yeah, I'm very big on that, obviously, is the mental side of things. And I think as entrepreneurs, this is the other side. Is we're generally very go people. We're driven A-type personalities, for the want of a better description. Very adrenaline, often dopamine focused. And for us, it's about also building in the recovery time, and that's not something I did well as a younger person. And probably don't do as well as I should now either. But it's prioritizing that parasympathetic state, that
Mm.
recovery, that rest, that healing. As hard as you go forward as an entrepreneur, you need to go just as hard in the recovery and the rest phase, because without it, you'll end up sick, and you'll end up broken, and you'll end up burnt out, and you'll be wondering why. And because I've been through this a few times now, why the stuff that I went through earlier I could handle, and now I'm not handling it. Why
Right.
am I not as resilient as I used to be? And really working hard on that piece of the puzzle. And I think the older you get, and the more I study things like the HPA axis and hormones, and what stress does in the body and things like that, the more I'm like, yep, that's got to be my number one focus for many people now, is dialing back that stress. And even if you can't dial it back in your life, because let's be honest, we've all got things coming at us that those tigers are chasing us all day. Is doubling down on the rituals and the habits and stacking habits that will help you stay as resilient as possible, putting good nutrition and putting good supplementation, and really keeping an eye on your health and sort of prioritizing that. I think that's a really good message for entrepreneurs and business people to think about.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of the things too that I mean, I also in my book that focuses on overcommitment. It really, as I was writing it, I kept well. So the first part that I sort of had a debate with my editor about was, sort of including things to sort of relieve your calendar, but also things that actually long term will have a bigger effect, like meditation and things like that. And so we kind of went back a few different times in terms of the way that it was going to look in the end.
Mm-hmm.
But it was one of those things where to your point about burnout, I just it's something that I worry about with a lot of the entrepreneurs that I work with, and even the people in larger corporations. I mean, we shifted from a point in time where you clearly had your work time and your personal time, and most people were going to an office and things like that. A
Yeah,
lot of that time has shifted, and we're
yeah,
working like this, right? Where we
yeah,
work like virtual
exactly.
people all the time. So I mean, people could say, well, hey, look, you could just work more then. Well, no, we still need
Exactly, and
breaks.
that's what happens, of course. Like, where is the off switch? And this is something I really struggle with too. It's 7 days a week, 24 hours a day if you're not careful, because you're either being sucked into some messages, inbox, emails, things that you've deadlines. It is really hard. And even like, us working in different time zones and trying to coordinate those time zones. And that can mean that, one of us is in the middle of the night doing a podcast or whatever. All of those challenges that we have to then double down on the recovery side of things. So I think that is, as humans, one of the biggest ailments we have is trying to drive down that sympathetic state and get that parasympathetic nervous system going, and the importance of that for your immune system, for your reproductive system, for your digestive system, for your ability to make clear, good executive decisions. That's where we underestimate what stress is doing. Like it is taking away the ability to do all of that. So it's not being selfish to take time out and stare at the ocean or cuddle the dog or the cat, or it's not being selfish, and it's not wasting time. With some of the people that I work with, I can't afford that time. I've got to go. And I'm like, actually, you need to double down on that stuff. There's that meme that goes around on the internet all the time of the little monk who's sitting there, meditate for 20 minutes a day, unless you're really, really stressed out, then meditate for an hour or something, to that effect. Yeah. And it's true. And it doesn't have to be a sitting meditation per se. I don't think there's different ways that we all do relax and recover, but it's focusing in on that piece is important.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, as we're talking, and I hadn't really made this connection before, but there are two entrepreneurs in life sciences that I know that are currently battling very intense cancer, and they've been sort of serial entrepreneurs in the space. So they've done this multiple times. Now all of a sudden they're battling cancer, and in part, one of the things that I've also heard from researchers in the past is that a lot of this stuff pertains to the stress that you take on.
Oh,
so
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, cancer is one of those things that we want to be more on the preventative side, right? And, I've just released a book called, the door's gone and opened behind me. Sorry about that, guys. The wind.
Wow. New Zealand breeze.
Yeah, there's a ghost at the door. So yeah, where was I? Like prevention is absolutely key, and that means keeping an eye on things like looking at your blood, tests and seeing what your immune system, what your blood cells, white blood cells are doing, and then keeping an eye on those things, because that is the first step towards seeing if something's going to go awry, and there are other tests and things that we can do and so on. But it's really, really important, I think, that we understand that stress can lead to things like cancer, heart disease, all of the big killers, really. It's not something that we optionally get to think, oh, well, I'll worry about that when I'm dead, or I'll worry about that in 10 years' time. It's something that we've got to work on the daily, And, and this life is not set up for us like that. So we have to take it. We have to make it happen, Optimize your sleep, optimize your nutrition, optimize your supplementation. Take time to do different therapies throughout the year if you can do that. All of these things where you're putting back in, not just pouring out all the time.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I mean, one of the things that, I'll just tell the listeners here as well that I'd love to talk to you about is taking the blood test that's available on your site. Would love to have, my information read, but I've done this a few different times as well, just to sort of figure out, are there vitamin deficiencies in me? Are other things in check or not? And of course I do it with my physician as well. I mean, I wouldn't say that I don't, but there's lots of tests that are out there available that can provide an awful lot of data. And then I tell people, I wear two of these bracelet things now. I wear, of course, my Apple Watch, and then I have my Whoop bracelet as well. And it's primarily because I feel like I get more data, which helps me sort of make decisions about what I should and shouldn't do as well. So
yeah, I'm just going to quickly shut that door. Sorry about that.
All right. Yep. Yeah. So for the listeners, I mean, one of the things that I would encourage you to do as well is, check out Lisa's website in addition to, just her books and things like that, information on things that are available. As she said already, she's a health coach and, she offers a test as well as a part of
Yeah,
her
so
coaching practice.
I
So,
do a lot of, I think data, as an entrepreneur, we need to understand our data. And it's probably some area that I'm pretty slack on, to be fair, in the business side of things, doing your analytics, boring. But that's really key, right? To know where the metrics are and your KPIs are sitting. And, and it's the same with your body. You shouldn't be driving your body without a dashboard. And that is not only blood tests, but things like genetic testing, understanding where your hormones are at periodically. And we don't need to be obsessive, because having aura rings and whoops and things, you can go down the other route where you're, oh my god, my heart rate's up 5 beats today, I'm going to die. It's you can go the opposite, but data helps you make good decisions, and test, don't guess. If something's going a little bit off, you're not feeling right, then you can go and have a look under the hood. And the earlier you look under the hood and see what's going on, and it could be a combination of tests and things, then you're more likely to be able to fix it. If you wait till I'll get round to it, that's when the wheels can fall off, and then you've got a major issue. And having dealt with mum's disabilities and things over the last 8 years, oh my gosh, if I could turn back the clock, if I could give myself the knowledge that I have now 8 years later, right, and go back to 10 years ago, man, I could have saved us and our family and like tons and tons of heartache and pain and money. Like the amount that gets spent once you are sick can bankrupt you, literally. Like, you trying to get your health back. So yes, it might be expensive to do some tests and to get some supplements or whatever the case may be, or get a trainer or a thing, but it can cost a hell of a lot more when you're actually dealing with a cancer or the results of an aneurysm or a stroke or a heart attack or whatever the case is. That could be damn sight more expensive.
Yeah, the number one reason why I wanted the Whoop was primarily because it tracks your sleep a little bit better.
Yeah.
With the Apple Watch, it frustrates me because no matter what, I've tried different ways to try and silence all the things so it doesn't bother me whenever I sleep. But it either is turning on or it vibrates occasionally to notify you of something that it thinks is important, and all that stuff just interrupts your sleep. So of course you're not going to get good sleep with an Apple Watch on. So
the developers need to listen to that and take that one into account. Yeah, you don't want anything to pull you out of your sleep. We want to be in there, right. Actually, and sleep, I think, Don, is one of those key areas. Before, if I had to prioritize what I'd be working on first, would be sleep optimization. And people often think, well, I just sleep poorly and I always have done, and therefore there is nothing I can do. And then I see they're having 5 cups of coffee and drinking alcohol at night and having a cheesecake at 10 o'clock. Well, you're not going to sleep well. So there may be things that we can put in a sleep routine that can really help optimize your sleep and really work on that piece, because it is the biggest leverage point. Before your diet, before your exercise, comes sleep. And I think the second most important area to understand and dial in, and depending on who you are and where you are in your life cycle, but hormones are just absolute for men and for women, not just for women. Often we forget about men and hormones. We need to have our hormones assessed and understand what we're doing with our hormones, how are we detoxing them, how is our liver health, how is all that sort of process going on. But if I tell you to go to the gym, eat better, but your hormones are out, you're not going to be able to go to the gym and work out, and you're going to have massive cravings, so you're not going to be able to stick to your diet, right? But if I can dial in your hormones first and dial in your sleep, then when you go to the gym, you're going to work out better, and you're going to have an easier time following a nutrition regime, because you're not going to have the massive cravings and the swings in sugar and stuff that come when things like your hormones are out or your sleep is out. So it's all very well and good for us to go, oh, you just eat better and exercise more, sometimes it's actually dialing back the exercise. For someone like me, I over-exercised for decades. I did damage to my body through inflammation, through too much oxidative stress. So there is such a thing as over-exercising, and there is such a thing as doing the right exercise for your particular genetic makeup is also another key important factor. That understanding where your genes sit and what type of exercise and what time of the day. Your circadian rhythms are really important. So,
Yes.
Are you someone who should be working out in the morning or someone who should be working out in the afternoon? You're going to get the best bang for your buck then. All of that nuances we have available now. We didn't used to have that info, and it's fabulous.
Right. Yeah.
We can shortcut. Yeah.
So I'd like to cover one last thing before we get to the last three questions. Time is just flying by on us. Whenever you think about team performance, so just to kind of, again, share with the audience a little bit about myself, right? So there have been many times in my career where I feel like I've had people tell me, hey, look, you should do this or that. And because of not sort of seeing that in myself, then having a more limited belief about the things that I can or can't do, one of the things, if anybody knows me very well, doing this podcast, especially on video, was very difficult for me in the very beginning. It's become easier, but it's only through practice and just listening to people around me saying, I wish you would share, this or that. And so those limiting beliefs are really tough. And it's something that I know that you Keynote speak on as well. So I thought I'd open up the floor, to you to just, talk to us a little bit about, sort of any of the work that you've done there.
Yeah. So I think that, most of us, if we're not psychopaths, have that imposter syndrome in us somewhere. That little voice, that little kid that was told that it wasn't very good at something, not bright enough, you can't do this, whatever the case was. We've all downloaded in our early childhood a set of beliefs that were downloaded to us from our environment, our friends, our family, our culture, and they don't serve us. And so as adults, we need to start re-examining some of those underlying subconscious programs that we're running and see if we can't undo those. And when you hear that little voice going, Don, you can't do a podcast. Who do you think you are? Nobody's going to listen to that. All that sort of self-talk, which we all can relate to on a daily basis, probably. It's just going, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. It's not true. And I've got this. Thanks very much for your input. Because we all have we're not schizophrenic. We've got like different voices inside of our heads, that have been planted there over the times and over the course of our childhood and our early years, mostly, where we've downloaded certain things. I'll give you an example out of Mum's life. She, when she was a young girl, she was up on stage doing a speech at the school competition, and she froze and she, couldn't get a word out on stage. And it was terribly embarrassing for her. From that moment on, she would never public speak, right? And yet she was a teacher, so she would talk in front of children, but she wouldn't, when she had the aneurysm and a lot of that past was broken, like a lot of those memories and the power of those memories was taken. And now she'll get up in front of an audience of 500 doctors and tell them her story, because that limiting belief is no longer running as a program, right? Because it's gone out of her memory banks, And so that's an example of a limiting belief that held her up all the way through her adult career, and then all of a sudden is no longer an issue, And that's what we're all doing every day. I do this all the time. It's not like you don't have these conversations of not being good enough. We all have them.
Yeah.
It's just going, okay, I hear you. I'm doing it anyway. I'm ignoring you,
Yeah. And I mean, and it's the same thing that I think it's called the crab cage or something like that, where other people around you also will try to hold you down as well, to
Oh
try and
yeah.
help you, because they could see that this could be a point of pain for you as well. Not saying that they're trying to do it to negatively limit anybody, because I think that's one way of interpreting it. But I also think that, just people try and protect people around them and say, hey, you may not want to
Exactly.
do that because it might cause you some extra pain. But at the same
Yes.
time, then you're not out there sharing, you're not sort of contributing to the world. And so that's, for me, this is a way to teach and share with the world, kind of other people's stories, hopefully. So.
Oh, I totally agree. And often your family and friends in the closest circle are the ones that will limit you the most. And again, not because they don't care about you and they want to hurt you, but because they are frightened for you, stepping outside of that into that dangerous, out of your comfort zone, whether that's, running across the desert or starting a new business, or studying to get a PhD in something. People will be going, oh no, don't do that. You're gonna, it's gonna be really, really tough, and we don't want you to experience that. And I find that just to be like, never understand that your family will likely not see your talents how other people will see them. To give the famous example, Jesus wasn't even recognized in his own hometown, right? He had to go further afield to be recognized for, just as a silly sort of example. But it is, in your hometown, you are never going to be let out of that box, because and your parents can be brilliant at this because they changed your nappies when you were 2. How can you have a PhD, or how can you be standing up on stage, or be a professional athlete? How can you do that? You're my little baby.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's hard for them to get their head around that. And it's not because they don't love you or believe in you. It's because they know you too well, and they've seen you go through those stages, and you may have evolved past those stages though. And that's not what they're seeing necessarily. And then you get people in your life who do want to hold you back.
Sure.
I've seen with lots of people who've, gone through weight loss journeys or something, and all of a sudden their friends aren't their friends anymore. Because, hello, this person's now successful in doing something that they can't do, and they don't like that because it makes them feel bad, and that's just sad, really. It's just a bit silly. We should be encouraging each other and lifting each other up, not and celebrating people's wins with them. I think
agree.
that's important too.
So, Lisa, there are 3 questions I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
My mum inspires me, as if you couldn't tell, because she keeps going regardless of what's happened to her. She gets up and she fights every day, and her mindset is just I put her through the ringer as far as training and strictness and stuff like that, and she never, well, occasionally she'll bite back, but not very often. And 2.5 years ago, we lost my precious dad, who was sort of the rock of our world for both of us, in some pretty hard circumstances. And yeah, it was rough times, and she just carries on and honors his memory, but is still going. Whereas I don't, I've struggled a lot more with that grief process and that whole thing. Not that she's not struggling, but she's just able to, this is what's happened. I have to deal with it. I have to keep moving forward, and, loving him and being grateful for everything that he was and represented, rather than falling into the abyss, which, I did for a while. Of what's the point of life questions, and it's hard. And I am inspired by that, and it keeps me going, because as long as she can fight, I'll fight. So yeah, she's someone that inspires me immensely.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And yeah, it's great to have inspirational parents for sure in our lives, or family members that, you can kind of look at and go, yeah, I just got to keep plodding forward, because they are.
Because they are, they're phenomenal. If they can keep going, I can keep going. Type of thing.
Absolutely. And what concerns you?
the state of the world.
Mm.
There's lots of obviously massive issues in the world. I'm concerned where a lot of things are heading. Obviously, I think we all are. But what I try to do with my concerns is, what can I practically impact? What can I change?
Mm-hmm.
And then try not to focus on the stuff that's outside of my control. So I'm very specific with the news that I let into my world, and very conscious when I go to actually watch anything. Is this going to serve me? Do I need to know this information right now? And we do need to know a certain amount, because we live in this world and we've got to function and we've got to know what's coming at us. But at the same time, to be completely bombarded with negativity every day, all the time, just gets our amygdala going and gets our fight or flight response going, and that exacerbates that stress response, right? And so we know from earlier conversations, we're trying to lower those stress levels. So being mindful of what information I let into my world, and then focusing, if I do look at something and it starts to scare me, and then I come back to, okay, what can I practically impact now in my world, and who can I help in my world, and focusing on those things. This is my work that I've been set down on this earth to do, and I'm going to have as big an impact as I possibly can. And if I focus on the positivity of working with people and working with my team, then I'm having an impact on the world. And I can't control what's happening, and it's beyond our power. So why focus on it?
Yeah.
I think,
Thank you for that.
awareness.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's important to, I think just limiting like negative things in your life, it sounds easy, but at the same time, it's hard whenever you're wanting to equally be informed as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's and picking your sources, picking your times, and setting aside time a day to go and do that, to keep up with what's going, and then trying to balance it out with positive stuff that's going, because we know how news works. We know that it's all clickbait and it's headlines and it's about capturing your fear, your amygdala. So you need to go and then go, okay, they're trying to sell newspapers, stories, books, whatever they're trying to sell. Where's the other side of the story that's not being told?
Mm-hmm.
And where's a beautiful story in your immediate neighborhood or environment that you could also focus on, that's a positive thing? Because we do only get the negative in the news. We know that because that sells. But there is a lot of beautiful things going on in the world, and there are a lot of good people doing a lot of good things. We're just not hearing about it, not much. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And then lastly, what excites you?
Growing and scaling business and trying to have a bigger impact in the world and reach more people. And that's why I'm so grateful for this opportunity too. That excites me. This gets my fire lit, and trying to, I'm focused on helping people be the CEO of their own health, helping people be in that preventative space, helping people understand a little bit and educate them around how their body works and what they should be learning, and putting them in connection with the great doctors and great scientists and great research and things like that, and using the latest in technological advances and testing. And so impacting as many people I can on a bigger scale is my goal. And as you know, that's a big challenge, scaling a business and trying to grow it. So I could definitely learn from you in your book.
I love that example of being the CEO of your health. That is such an important thing to, as well.
Absolutely, because it's gone are the days where you gave up all your power to your local medical practitioner, one person, and they told you everything that you should do. For starters, that person is usually overwhelmed with 1,000 other people. It's better to have a team approach, and to have a board of directors, so to speak, that can input a team of people around you. So if I'm working with someone, for example, with cancer or head injuries or whatever, we often have a team, resources willing, and all of that sort of aspect, but a team of people with differing specialties and differing expertises and differing opinions sometimes. And I bring that information in, and then I help the person be the CEO of that information, and trying to gauge what do we do next, and which protocols do we follow, and what therapies do we put in, and how do we triage that, and so on and so forth. And I think there's a real big need for that in the world, helping people navigate rather than just one person, one doctor, and getting all your input from that one place, especially when that's negative input. Like mum a year and a half ago told by 5 different doctors, you're terminally ill, you've got weeks to live, there is nothing we can do. And they couldn't be further from the truth.
Wow.
And she has a team of 15 doctors on her team, and that's extreme, and I'm extreme.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to that length, but hey, she's still here, and she's still doing really, really well.
Yeah.
And it's taken a lot, and you don't have to go to that extreme, and hopefully you don't face something as drastic as that, but that team approach is, for me, gold.
Yeah. And then the last question that I have for you is, where can people find out more about you, and how can people get in touch?
Yeah, thanks, Don. LisaTamati.com is my website. So Tamati is Tamati. That sort of houses everything, sort of things. I have a supplement range and genetic testing. I have 3 books that I've written. And I've just released a book called What Your Oncologist Isn't Telling You, which is an ebook with an interview series with a whole lot of scientists. So that's probably the best place, or on Instagram at Lisa Tamati. And I have a podcast that Don's going to come on shortly called Pushing the Limits. And that's a real passion project, and I love it. And I've been doing it for 8 years. So yeah, check out Pushing the Limits. I'd really appreciate that.
Very good. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for being a guest on the Life Science Success Podcast. I greatly appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I appreciate the work you're doing, and I can definitely learn a lot from you. So I'm looking forward to hosting you in the reverse.
Thanks a lot.